I received the wedding invitation for my daughter, Sarah. The date was May 15th, 2023. I arrived that day to a completely empty venue. She called me, laughing. "Oops, Dad, the wedding was yesterday. It was intentional." But what she didn't know is that I kept every receipt, every piece of proof, every lie. Before we continue, subscribe to William's Revenge Stories and hit the bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is David Moreno. I'm 64 years old, and for my entire life, I believed a father's love was unconditional and unbreakable. I thought the sacrifices we make for our children would always be valued, remembered, honored. I believed that my 32-year-old daughter, Sarah, held in her heart all those moments when I was there for her when no one else was. I was wrong, or maybe not. Maybe everything I went through was necessary to teach her the most important lesson a father can give, that dignity is not negotiable, and that every action has a consequence. It all started in March 2023, when I received an elegant ivory envelope in the mail with gold-embossed details. I remember that moment perfectly. It was a Saturday afternoon. I had just finished my shift at the logistics company where I've worked for 28 years as a warehouse coordinator. I got to my modest but tidy apartment in a quiet suburb, where I've lived alone since I divorced Linda Ortega 9 years ago. I opened the envelope with hands trembling with excitement. It was the wedding invitation for my daughter Sarah and Daniel Rubio. The ceremony was scheduled for May 15th, 2023, at 11 inches the morning, at the Rose Garden Event Hall. I read and reread that date several times. May 15th, a Tuesday. It seemed strange they would choose a weekday, but I thought maybe it had to do with the venue's availability or some special reason for them. I held that invitation to my chest and closed my eyes. The tears came without asking. I had been dreaming of this moment for 32 years, walking my daughter down the aisle, symbolically giving her to a man who would love her as much as I loved her, from the first second I saw her. I remembered the day she was born, July 22nd, 1991. I was 32 years old, the same age she is now. Linda had a difficult 18-hour labor. When I finally heard Sarah's cry, something inside me changed forever. The first few years were beautiful. I worked double shifts, first as a night taxi driver, and during the day as an administrative assistant at a transport company. I barely slept 4 hours a day, but every second of exhaustion was worth it. I wanted to give Sarah the best. Private school, piano lessons, educational trips. Linda and I didn't have much money, but I compensated for that lack with constant effort. I perfectly remember the nights Sarah had nightmares. Linda was a heavy sleeper, so I was the one who got up, held her, sang her made-up songs until she fell back asleep. I remember her first steps, her first word, which was Dada, her drawings that I kept all in a special box. I remember taking her on my bike to the park every Sunday, teaching her to swim at the community pool, helping her with math homework that I barely understood myself, but I would research it so I could explain it to her. When Sarah turned 15, she started dreaming out loud about her future wedding. "Dad," she would tell me while we had breakfast together, "when I get married, I want you to walk me down the aisle. I want you to be the one to give me away." I would smile and promise her that day would be the happiest day of my life. And I believed it. I believed it with every fiber of my being. The divorce from Linda came in 2015, when Sarah was 24. It was a painful process, but necessary. Linda had changed over the years. She had become bitter, resentful, always comparing herself to friends who had more money. She constantly criticized me for not earning enough, for not having a bigger house, for not being able to give her luxuries she considered essential. I tried to save the marriage, but it reached a point where I understood I was living with a stranger who only saw my shortcomings and never my efforts. After the divorce, I kept in constant contact with my 2 children, Sarah and her younger brother Michael, who was 19 at the time. Michael was always noble, transparent, loyal. He decided to live with me for a while before moving out on his own. Sarah, on the other hand, chose to stay with her mother in the apartment I gave up as part of the divorce settlement. I didn't hold a grudge against her for that decision. She was her mother. It was natural for her to want to be with her. Over the following years, I noticed subtle changes in Sarah. Her calls became less frequent. Our monthly lunches started getting canceled. She always had excuses. Work, commitments, being tired. When we did see each other, conversations that once flowed naturally now felt forced, uncomfortable. She would constantly look at her phone, respond in single syllables, and seemed anxious to end the meeting. But I justified everything. She's young, I told myself. She's building her life. It's normal for her to pull away a bit. I never wanted to be that possessive father who doesn't let his children go, so I gave her space, trusting that the love we had built over decades was solid enough to withstand any distance. In 2019, Sarah called me, excited. She had found the perfect apartment in a nice part of town, but she needed help with the down payment. The total price was $140,000. I had my life savings, exactly $153,000 set aside for my retirement. Without a second thought, I transferred $140,000 to her account. I put the apartment in her name as an early wedding gift. She cried with happiness over the phone. She told me, "You're the best dad in the world." I was left with $13,000 for emergencies and felt like I had made the best decision of my life. Now, holding that wedding invitation in March 2023, I felt everything made sense. My sacrifice had been worth it. My daughter was getting married, and I would be there, proud, emotional, fulfilling the dream we had both shared since she was a teenager. The following weeks I dedicated completely to preparing for that day. I went to 3 different stores before finding the perfect suit. A classic cut navy blue that cost me $450, more than I would normally spend, but this was special. I rehearsed the speech I would give at the reception in front of the mirror. I had written 17 different versions, searching for the exact words to express 32 years of unconditional love. I also prepared a special gift for Sarah and Daniel, an envelope with $5,000 that I had managed to save by working overtime for 6 months. I wanted to help them start their married life without financial pressure. I called Sarah several times during those weeks to coordinate details. Her replies were brief, almost sharp. "Dad, everything is organized. Don't worry," she would say impatiently. When I asked her about the ceremony rehearsal, if she needed me to come early to practice the entrance, she replied, "It's not necessary, Dad. Just be there on the 15th at 11. Something in her voice bothered me, but again, I attributed it to the typical pre-wedding jitters. The night of May 14th, the day before the date on my invitation, I could barely sleep. I checked 1,000 times that the suit was perfect, that the gift was ready, that the speech was in my pocket. I got up at 6 in the morning on May 15th, showered, shaved carefully, and dressed slowly, savoring every moment. I looked in the mirror and saw a happy father, a man who had fulfilled his purpose in life. I left my apartment at 9 in the morning. The Rose Garden Event Hall was a 40-minute trip on public transport. I arrived at 10, an hour early in case they needed anything last minute. I carried a bouquet of white flowers for Sarah, her favorite since she was a little girl. But when I got to the venue, I found the gates locked. There were no cars parked, no decorations, no one. The silence was absolute, heavy, unnatural. My heart started beating uncontrollably. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. I dialed Sarah's number with clumsy fingers, almost dropping the phone twice. The rings felt eternal, each second like a full hour. 1, 2, 3, 4 rings. No answer. I tried again immediately. This time, after the 6th ring, she finally picked up. "Hello?" she said in a calm, almost bored voice. "Sarah, honey, I'm at the Rose Garden and it's all closed up. There's no one here. What's going on? Did the location change? Did I get the address wrong?" My voice was rushed, desperate. There was a silence. Then I heard something that chilled me to the bone. A laugh. It wasn't a nervous or awkward laugh. It was a cold, calculated, cruel laugh. "Oops, Dad," she said in a mocking tone. I had never heard from her before. The wedding was yesterday, May 14th, not the 15th. What a shame you missed it. I guess you didn't read the invitation correctly. The world stopped. My legs almost gave out. What? No, wait. My invitation clearly says May 15th. I have the paper right here, Sarah. It says the 15th. Oh, Dad. It must have been a printing error then. What a pity. Well, it's over now. It's done. It was a beautiful ceremony, you can't imagine. The hall was gorgeous, the white flowers well, whatever. Thomas walked me down the aisle. It was very emotional. Thomas Rubio, Daniel's father. A 68-year-old businessman, owner of 3 car dealerships in Chicago. A man who had always looked at me with barely disguised contempt on the few occasions we had met. Thomas walked you down the aisle? I repeated like a robot, unable to process the words. Yes, Dad. Someone had to do it. We couldn't wait, right? Anyway, I have to go. We're finishing up organizing things for the honeymoon. We'll talk another day. And she hung up. I stood there in front of those closed gates, the phone still pressed to my ear, the bouquet of white flowers in my other hand. Cars drove by on the avenue behind me. Life went on as normal for everyone, except for me. My mind tried to find some logical sense in what I had just heard. A printing error. Impossible. Invitations are checked multiple times before printing, and even if it had been a genuine mistake, why didn't anyone call to let me know? Why didn't my own daughter check that I had the correct date? I pulled the invitation from my inner jacket pocket. I studied it under the May sunlight. There it was, printed in elegant gold ink. The 15th of May, 2023, 11 a.m. There was no ambiguity. There was no way to get it wrong. The number 15 was perfectly clear. I opened my phone with hands that were now shaking for different reasons. I went on Instagram, a social network I hardly ever used but had installed precisely to see occasional posts from my children. I looked for Sarah's profile. Her last post was from 3 hours ago. Wedding photos. Dozens of photos. The images hit me like physical punches. Sarah, radiant in a white lace dress, with long sleeves and a long train. Daniel, dapper in a flawless black tuxedo, the hall decorated exactly as she had described. White flowers everywhere, warm lights, tables with champagne-colored tablecloths. But what destroyed me the most was one specific photo. Thomas Rubio, arm in arm with my daughter, walking down the central aisle, while guests smiled on both sides. I should have been in that photo. That was my place, my moment, my right, earned with 32 years of unconditional love. I swiped through the images with growing horror. There were at least 200 guests. I recognized faces. Linda's family, Sarah's friends from college, Daniel's co-workers. Everyone had been there. Everyone except me. In no photo was there an empty chair with my name on it. In no image was there any sign that someone had asked about my absence. It was as if I had never existed in my daughter's life. The comments under the posts were all gushing congratulations. Beautiful wedding. What a perfect couple. It was an unforgettable celebration. Not a single comment asked about the bride's father. Not one. I kept checking. I found the profile of Linda, my ex-wife. She had also posted photos. In one of them, she appeared next to Thomas Rubio and his wife, the 3 of them smiling with champagne glasses in their hands. The caption read, "Families united in love and prosperity." Families. As if I weren't part of any family. As if 32 years could be erased with a simple omission. I looked for the profile of Michael, my younger son. He had only posted one photo. From a distance. Of the decorated hall. No caption. Comments disabled. That gave me a small bit of relief. Michael had been there, probably forced by family pressure, but his cold and distant post indicated he wasn't comfortable with the situation. I put my phone away. I looked at the bouquet of flowers I was still holding. Suddenly they seemed ridiculous. Out of place. Pathetic. A 64-year-old man, standing alone in front of an empty venue with flowers wilting in the sunday. I looked for a nearby trash can and threw the bouquet inside. The flowers fell with a dry, final thud. I walked to the bus stop. Each step required conscious effort. My mind replayed Sarah's laugh on the phone over and over. That mocking tone, that coldness. It wasn't the voice of someone regretting a misunderstanding. It was the voice of someone who had achieved exactly what she wanted. The trip back to my suburb was a blur. I don't remember getting on the bus. I don't remember the ride. I only remember being back in my apartment, taking off that navy blue suit I had chosen with so much excitement, hanging it carefully in the closet, as if it still mattered. I sat on the living room sofa. The curtains were closed, leaving the room in shadows. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't turn on the television. I just sat there, in silence, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. It hadn't been a mistake. That's what my mind finally accepted. Invitations don't have printing errors on the date, the most important piece of information of all. And even if they did, the bride calls her father to verify. The bride makes sure her father, the man who dreamed of walking her down the aisle, has the correct information. Unless the bride doesn't want her father to be there. That truth settled in my chest like a lead weight. My daughter had deliberately excluded me from her wedding. She had given me a fake date. She had let me arrive at an empty venue. She had humiliated me in the cruelest way possible. But why? That was the question hammering in my head. What had I done to deserve this treatment? I mentally reviewed every recent interaction with Sarah. We had never fought. I had never denied her anything. I had always been available when she needed me. So what? The answer came slowly, like fog seeping through cracks. I remembered visits to Linda's house over the last few years. The few times I was invited, I felt uncomfortable stares from her family. I heard whispered comments about my job, my small apartment, my old car. I specifically remembered a Christmas dinner 3 years ago, where Linda's brother, a corporate lawyer, had asked with a condescending tone, "Still at the same warehouse job, David?" The way he said it, as if it were something shameful. I remembered meeting Thomas Rubio 2 years ago, when Sarah officially introduced Daniel as her boyfriend. The 6 of us went to dinner: Sarah, Daniel, Thomas, and his wife Susan, Linda, and me. Thomas had spent the entire dinner talking about his businesses, his properties, his international trips. Every story was a display of wealth. When he asked me what I did for a living and I replied that I was a warehouse coordinator, his expression changed subtly. A micro-expression of disappointment, almost disgust. He stopped addressing me for the rest of the evening. Now I understood. To them, I was an embarrassment. The poor father, the man with no money or status who didn't fit the perfect image they wanted to project at that wedding. Thomas Rubio, successful businessman, looked better in the photos walking the bride down the aisle. David Moreno, warehouse coordinator in a modest suit, ruined the aesthetic. That realization hurt me more than the exclusion itself. My daughter had chosen appearances over love. She had chosen money over history. She had chosen to impress her new family over honoring her father. I got up from the sofa when it got completely dark outside. I went to the kitchen. I made coffee even though I knew I wouldn't sleep anyway. I sat at the small table where I had rehearsed my speech so many times. I took out the 17 written versions and read them one by one. Words about unconditional love, sacrifice, paternal pride. Words that no one would ever hear. I methodically tore them into small pieces and threw them in the trash. Something changed in me that night. It wasn't an emotional breakdown. It wasn't a collapse. It was clarity. Cold, perfect clarity. If my daughter had planned this, if she had made such calculated decisions, then I could also plan. I could also make decisions. But mine would have consequences she never imagined. 4 days passed since that May 15th. 4 days in which I didn't leave my apartment except to go to work. I completed my shifts at the warehouse with mechanical efficiency. I answered when spoken to. I performed my tasks without errors. But my mind was elsewhere, processing, analyzing, understanding patterns I had ignored for years. On Wednesday night, May 19th, my doorbell rang. It was 8:15. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw Michael standing in the hallway, with a serious expression and his hands in his jacket pockets. I opened the door. "Son," I said simply. "Dad, we need to talk." His tone was grave, worried. He walked in without waiting for an invitation and sat on the sofa where I had spent hours motionless days before. I made tea for both of us. Michael watched his hands while I brought the cups to the coffee table. I sat across from him in the armchair. I waited. I knew my younger son well enough to know he had come with a specific purpose and would speak when he was ready. I was at the wedding, he began finally, without looking me in the eye. They made me go. Mom called me 20 times, threatening to never speak to me again if I didn't attend. I went out of obligation, not because I supported what they were doing. I know, I replied calmly. I saw your post on social media. A single photo with no comments. I understood the message. Michael looked up. Dad, you need to know something. What happened wasn't an accident. It wasn't a printing error or a misunderstanding. I already know, I said again, taking a sip of tea. My son seemed surprised by my calmness. He probably expected to find me devastated, crying, broken. But the 4 days of silence had given me something more valuable than release. Perspective. So you know it was planned, Michael insisted. I suspect it, but tell me what you know. Michael took a deep breath. 2 months ago, mid-March, I went to Mom's house to get some documents I needed for some paperwork. She didn't know I still had a key. I went in and heard voices in the living room. Mom, Sarah, Thomas Rubio, and his wife Susan. They were having coffee and talking about the wedding. He paused, as if what he was about to say caused him physical pain. I heard Thomas say, "So the problem is solved then. We give him the wrong date, and that's that. No one has to know there's a penniless father." Mom laughed and said, "He was always my embarrassment, that man with no ambition." Sarah was quiet at first, but then she said, "It's okay, Thomas is right. This wedding is important for Daniel's image. We can't have pictures with, you know." The words hung in the air between us. Michael had tears in his eyes. I didn't. "Continue," I said in a firm voice. Susan Rubio, Thomas's wife, suggested they print 2 batches of invitations. One with the real date, May 14th, for all the real guests, and a special one for you, with the date May 15th. Sarah agreed. She said it was the cleanest way to handle it, so you wouldn't have a chance to show up and ruin everything. Mom added that it would also teach you a lesson about knowing your place in life. Michael wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Dad, I wanted to tell you. I swear I did, but Sarah caught me listening. She made me swear not to tell you anything. She said if I did, she would cut off all contact with me too and convince Mom to do the same. She emotionally blackmailed me. She said I had to choose between you or them. I'm a coward, Dad. I'm so sorry." "You're not a coward," I replied firmly. "You were in an impossible position. And besides, you came here now. That takes courage. I came because I can't live with this." "I saw your face in the pictures," Sarah posted. "Well, the absence of your face. I saw how everyone commented congratulations without anyone asking about you, as if you never existed. It made me sick. It made me ashamed to share blood with those people." I got up and sat next to Michael on the sofa. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for telling me." I needed to confirm what I already suspected. "What are you going to do?" my son asked, looking directly at me. "I don't know exactly yet, but I'm going to do something. Because this can't be left like this." Michael nodded. "There's more you should know. The apartment you bought for Sarah in 2019, in that nice neighborhood, she and Daniel completely remodeled it 6 months ago. They spent a fortune. I heard Sarah tell Mom they took out a $60,000 bank loan for the renovation. They want to sell it in a few years when the market goes up and make a profit. That information sparked something in my brain. The apartment was in Sarah's name. Yes, but I had bought it. I had all the receipts, all the bank transfers. It had been a gift conditional on her marriage. A donation. Anything else? I asked. Michael hesitated. Then he continued. Last November, Sarah asked you for $12,000, right? She said she needed an urgent medical operation. Yes, I remember perfectly. She called me crying. She said she had a gynecological problem that required private surgery not covered by insurance. I transferred her the money that same day. There was no operation, Dad. She used that money to pay for part of the early honeymoon they took in December to the Maldives. I know because Mom showed me pictures, bragging about the trip. When I asked how they paid for it, since Sarah always complained about not having savings, Mom laughed and said, "Your father is useful for something. At least. They got $12,000 out of you with the story about the operation. They were laughing at you, Dad. They were making fun of how easy it was to manipulate you." Something cold and hard settled in my chest. It wasn't uncontrolled rage. It was pure, crystalline determination. For 32 years I had given without asking for anything in return. I had worked to the point of exhaustion. I had sacrificed my own dreams, and had done it with genuine love, believing I was building unbreakable bonds with my daughter. But bonds require two people holding on. I had been holding on alone for years without realizing it. Sarah had let go of her end a long time ago, probably influenced by Linda and her resentment, then reinforced by the Rubio family and their classist contempt. "Michael, I need you to be honest with me. When did Sarah change? When did she stop being the little girl who wrote me letters saying I was the best dad in the world?" My son thought carefully before answering. "I think it was gradual, after the divorce. Mom constantly spoke badly about you to her. She told her you were the reason she didn't have a better life, that if you had tried harder, earned more, been more ambitious, they would have lived as they deserved." Over the years, Sarah started to believe it. Then she met Daniel and his family. The Rubios live in a completely different world. Big houses, luxury cars, vacations abroad. I think Sarah became ashamed of her origins, of us, of you especially. "And you're not?" I asked. "You've seen that life too. Why aren't you ashamed?" "Because I remember. I remember the nights you came home exhausted from working 2 shifts, and still sat down to help me with math. I remember you sold your car to pay for my college prep course. I remember when I got sick with appendicitis at 13, you slept in a chair next to my hospital bed for 4 straight days. I remember who you really are." Sarah chose to forget. Or worse, she chose to rewrite history so that you were the villain, and she was the victim. We were silent for several minutes. Outside, the May night was warm. Through the open window came the sounds of neighbors having dinner, televisions on, normal life continuing. "Dad," Michael said finally, "I will support you in whatever you decide to do. If you need a witness for anything, if you need me to confirm information, count on me. I owe that to the man who sacrificed everything for his children, even if one of them turned out to be ungrateful." I hugged my son. It was a long, necessary hug. At least one of my children had preserved values, humanity, loyalty. When Michael left around 11 p.m., I was alone again. But this time, the loneliness was different. It was no longer the painful silence of freshly discovered betrayal. It was the productive silence of a strategy forming. I sat in front of my laptop. I opened a digital folder where I kept all the important documents of my life. I found the bank transfers for the apartment. $140,000 transferred on the 12th of April 2019 to the account of Sarah Moreno. I found the emails where she thanked me for the gift. I found the gift deed we had signed before a notary. I read that document carefully for the first time in 4 years. There was a clause in paragraph 3 that I had completely forgotten. This gift may be revoked by the donor in the event of manifest ingratitude by the donee. I looked up the legal definition. It clearly stated that causes for revocation included causing serious injury, denying support, and attempting on the donor's life. But it also mentioned that case law had expanded the concept of manifest ingratitude to acts demonstrating contempt or a serious lack of respect towards the donor, deliberately excluding me from her wedding after years of sacrifice, deceiving me with a false date, publicly humiliating me, laughing at my absence, lying to me about a medical operation to steal money from me. That sounded like manifest ingratitude. I printed all the relevant documents. I organized them in a physical folder. I added screenshots of the wedding posts. I printed the bank statements showing the transfer of $12,000 in November 2022 with the description medical emergency. It was 2 a.m. when I finished. I had a complete folder with documentary evidence of everything. I knew it wasn't enough yet. I needed legal advice. I needed to understand exactly what my options were. But for the first time since May 15th, I felt something like control. I wasn't a passive victim waiting for an apology that would never come. I was a man making active decisions about his own dignity. Sarah had planned my humiliation for months. Now I would plan my response. And my response would be legal, measured, just. But it would be final. The following days were not spent reviewing documents or bank statements. I already had that information organized. What I did was something more painful and necessary. I revisited every significant memory with Sarah, forcing myself to see them with new eyes, searching for the exact moment my daughter stopped loving me and started using me. I sat in my armchair with an old shoebox I'd kept in the closet for years. Inside were letters, drawings, photographs, movie tickets, physical memories of 32 years of fatherhood. I opened the box slowly, like someone opening a wound that never healed properly. The first letter was dated June 2006. Sarah was 15, teenage handwriting, purple ink, hearts drawn in the corners. Dad, today in class they asked us to write about our hero. Everyone wrote about soccer players or singers. I wrote about you. You are my hero because you work so hard so I can go to a good school, because you always have time for me even when you're tired, because you teach me that money doesn't make people valuable. Their actions do. I love you, Dad. You're the best dad in the whole world. I had to stop, take a deep breath. That 15-year-old girl had really existed. She wasn't my invention. She had been genuine. Her words had been honest. So what happened? I continued searching in the box. I found a photograph from her college graduation in 2013. Sarah in a cap and gown, smiling widely, hugging me with genuine force. I was smiling too, proud, with wrinkles around my eyes that told stories of sleepless nights to pay for that university. Behind us, barely visible, was Linda with a neutral, almost bored expression. I remembered that day with perfect clarity. It had been June, sweltering heat. The ceremony lasted 3 hours under the Sunday. Linda complained the whole time about the heat, the length, the uncomfortable chairs, but Sarah seemed happy. When they called her name and she received her degree in business administration, she looked for me in the crowd and gave me a smile that lit up the entire auditorium. After the ceremony, I took her to dinner at a modest but nice restaurant. Linda didn't want to join us. She said she had a headache. Sarah and I ate paella, talked about her future plans, her dreams of working in a big company, maybe getting a master's degree someday. I gave her a gift I'd prepared, an envelope with $2,000 saved over a whole year. For your future, I told her. She cried, hugged me, told me I was the reason she had managed to finish her degree. At what point did that gratitude turn into contempt? I kept reviewing memories, but this time looking for signs I had ignored. I found another photo, this one from Christmas 2015, the first Christmas after the divorce. Sarah was 24. She was already living with Linda in the apartment I had given them. The photo showed a dinner at Linda's sister's house. I was sitting at a corner of the table, isolated. Sarah was at the other end, surrounded by cousins and uncles from Linda's side. No one was looking at me. It was as if I were an uncomfortable guest, tolerated out of obligation. I remembered that night now with a different perspective. I had brought gifts for everyone. A scarf for Sarah, perfume for Linda, wine for the hosts. The gifts were opened with forced smiles. Then came the gifts from Linda's family. Expensive technology, designer clothes, jewelry. My gifts were forgotten in a corner. At some point during that dinner, Linda's brother-in-law, an architect named Vincent, asked about my job. I explained I was still a warehouse coordinator. He made a comment that seemed harmless then, but now resonated differently. Well, someone has to do those jobs, right? Quiet laughter around the table. Sarah didn't laugh, but she didn't defend me either. She looked down at her plate. She was ashamed. Of me. Of her own father. I closed my eyes, trying to remember more interactions from those post-divorce years. Sarah's phone calls became predictable in their structure. They started with a polite question. "How are you, Dad?" I would answer. I tried to talk about my life, my work, a movie I had seen. She would listen with clearly forced patience. Then came the real reason for the call. "Dad, I need help with something." It was always money. Car repair, dental treatment, a specialization course, new furniture. I always said yes. I transferred what she asked for without question. After receiving the money, Sarah would disappear for weeks. She wouldn't answer calls. She would reply to messages with single syllables days later, until she needed something again. Why didn't I see the pattern? Why did I refuse to accept that my daughter had turned me into an emotional ATM? Because parents want to believe. We want to believe that the love we gave will return. We want to believe that the sacrifices were valued. We want to believe our children are better than the evidence suggests. So, we ignore signs. We justify behaviors. We forgive offenses. I found a receipt in the box from 2017, orthodontic treatment for Sarah. $5,300 paid in 18 monthly installments. She was 26. She was working full-time at a marketing company. She earned a decent salary. But she called me saying her smile made her feel insecure, that she needed braces but couldn't afford them. I agreed immediately. I paid every installment on time for a year and a half. When the treatment was finished, she posted photos on social media, showing off her new smile, gushing thanks to her orthodontist. Not a single mention of the person who paid every cent of that procedure. Another receipt. Car repair in 2018. $3,200. Sarah had crashed her car while distracted by her phone. The insurance didn't cover everything. She called me crying, saying she couldn't get to work without a car, that she would lose her job. I transferred the full amount the next day, delaying the replacement of my apartment's refrigerator that I had been planning for 6 months. A list after list of expenses I had covered: university, car, apartment, orthodontics, repairs, emergencies. Several of them. They easily added up to more than $200,000 over 32 years. I didn't regret the money itself. I regretted having confused material provision with reciprocated love. Sarah had learned that by crying on the phone, telling me, "You're my only hope, Dad," she could open my wallet instantly. She had perfected emotional manipulation into an art form, and I had been a willing blank canvas. But what hurt the most wasn't the money. It was the calculated coldness of her wedding exclusion. That required another level of cruelty. It wasn't an impulse. It wasn't a mistake. It was a meditated decision, planned months in advance, executed with surgical precision. I wondered if Sarah felt anything when she heard I had arrived at the empty venue that May 15th. Did she feel guilt? Remorse? Her laugh on the phone suggested she didn't. It suggested satisfaction. It suggested she had achieved exactly what she wanted. A perfect wedding, flawless photographs, a poor father eliminated from the narrative. I thought of all the times I defended her to Linda during our marriage. Linda constantly criticized Sarah. Her grades were never good enough. Her friends were never appropriate enough. Her interests were never valuable enough. I was the one who comforted her, who told her she was perfect just as she was, who validated her feelings. It's ironic that Sarah ended up becoming an amplified version of what Linda always was, someone who measures human worth in bank accounts. I put the letters and photographs back in the box. I closed the lid. That chapter was finished. Not because I chose it, but because Sarah had closed it the day she decided I didn't deserve to be at her wedding. I had spent days processing pain. Now it was time to process options. I wouldn't seek revenge. Revenge is emotional, reactive, destructive for the one who carries it out as much as for the one who receives it. I would seek something different: justice, consequences proportional to actions, clear boundaries where there had once been infinite permissiveness. My daughter needed to learn that humiliating someone who loved you unconditionally has a cost, that lying to steal money has repercussions, that people are not disposable resources you use until they're exhausted and then discard. I was going to teach her that lesson, not with yelling or reproaches, with legal, measured, irrevocable actions. And if at the end of all this, Sarah understood the damage she caused and felt genuine remorse, maybe there would be room for a conversation. But first, She had to face real consequences. Because a father's love has limits, and she had just crossed all of mine. On Monday, May 22nd, I requested the afternoon off from work. My supervisor, an understanding man named Albert who vaguely knew my family situation, approved the leave without questions. At 2 p.m., I was in front of the law firm Miller & Associates, located in a 4-story corporate building downtown. A young receptionist, about 30 years old, greeted me with warm professionalism. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment?" "Yes, David Moreno. An appointment with Mr. James Miller at 2:30. She showed me to a seat in a waiting area decorated with modern but sober furniture. There were legal journals on the coffee table. I didn't touch them. My hands held the thick folder with all the documentation I had prepared for days. At 2:30 sharp, a man of about 52 came out of an office down the hall. Tall, average build, perfectly combed graying hair, impeccable dark gray suit. He extended his hand as he approached. "Mr. Moreno? I'm James Miller. Please, come in." His office was spacious, orderly, shelves filled with legal codes, university degrees framed on the wall, a large dark wood desk. He offered me a seat across from him and settled into his ergonomic chair. "Tell me, Mr. Moreno, on the phone you mentioned a delicate family matter related to a gift. For the next 40 minutes, I told him everything. From the beginning. The invitation with the altered date, arriving at the empty venue, Sarah's cruel phone call, Michael's revelations about the premeditated plan. I told him about the $140,000 apartment gift, the fraudulent $12,000 loan for a non-existent operation. I showed him every document, bank transfers, deeds, emails, screenshots from social media showing the wedding where I was excluded. James Miller listened without interrupting. He took occasional notes in a legal pad. His expression remained neutral, professional, but I detected moments where his jaw tightened slightly at particularly cruel details of the story. When I finished, he studied the documents meticulously. He read the entire gift deed, especially the clause in paragraph 3. He reviewed the bank statements, examined the dates, verified the timeline. He took almost 20 minutes in this silent analysis. Finally, he spoke. "Mr. Moreno, legally, you have a solid case for revocation of the gift due to manifest ingratitude. The law establishes specific causes, but case law has consistently expanded the concept of ingratitude to acts that demonstrate serious contempt for the donor." He paused. He consulted his notes. The deliberate exclusion from a significant family event, especially through premeditated deception, constitutes an objective grievance. Add to that the fraud of the loan under a false medical pretext, and we have a clear pattern of abusive and manipulative behavior toward you. "What are my real chances of success?" I asked directly. 80, maybe 85%. The documentation is impeccable. You have a direct witness to the planning, which is your son Michael. You have physical proof of the altered invitation. You have photographic evidence voluntarily published by your daughter showing the real wedding that occurred on May 14th. And you have a history of transfers demonstrating your constant generosity contrasted with her progressive ingratitude. James leaned back in his chair. "But I must warn you of something important. This type of litigation permanently destroys family relationships. There is no going back. If you proceed with this, the break with your daughter will be final and irreparable. I need you to be completely sure that you are prepared for that consequence." "The relationship is already destroyed," I replied with a calmness that surprised even me. "My daughter deliberately excluded me from her wedding. She stole money from me through lies. She allowed her new family to humiliate me. There is no relationship to preserve. There is only dignity to recover." The lawyer nodded slowly. "I understand. Then let me explain the process. We will file a civil lawsuit in the competent court requesting the revocation of the property gift. We will base it on manifest ingratitude. We will attach all this documentation as evidence. We will also include a claim for the restitution of the $12,000 obtained fraudulently, plus interest and monetary correction since November 2022. How long does the process take?" I asked. "It depends on the court's caseload. usually between 4 and 6 months from filing the lawsuit to a first instance judgment. If the other party appeals, it could extend for another year. But based on the strength of your case, I doubt an appeal would succeed. Costs? My fees are $3,500 to handle the entire case up to a final judgment. If there's an appeal, an additional fee would be reviewed, but we'll cross that bridge if we get to it. Additionally, you'll need to pay court fees of approximately $400. I did some quick mental calculations. I currently had $18,000 saved after years of frugal living. Spending almost $4,000 on fees was a significant investment, but I could potentially recover the apartment valued at $140,000 plus the $12,000 from the fraudulent loan. Mathematically, it made sense. Emotionally, it was necessary. Proceed, I said firmly. James Miller opened a new file on his computer. I need to ask you some additional questions for the lawsuit. What was the explicit purpose of the apartment gift? Was there any verbal or written condition? It was an early gift for her future marriage. I told her that clearly when I transferred the money. I have emails where she thanks me for the early wedding gift. We both always understood it was for when she formed her own family. Perfect. That establishes that the gift was linked to a family event where you would naturally expect to participate. Her intentional exclusion from that event then carries additional weight. Were there other incidents of mistreatment or contempt besides what you've already mentioned? I thought carefully. She progressively stopped inviting me to her family events. Birthdays, dinners, gatherings, always with vague excuses. The phone calls only happened when she needed something material. When I tried to talk about my life, she cut the conversation short. In meetings where we did see each other, she would vaguely introduce me as David, avoiding saying my father, especially in front of friends of a higher socioeconomic level. James typed quickly. That builds a pattern of progressive shame and rejection. Useful for the case. Did your ex-wife Linda actively participate in the planning of the exclusion, according to your son Michael's testimony? Yes. Michael clearly heard Linda support the plan and make derogatory comments about me. She was present at the meeting where they decided to give me the wrong date. Linda is not a party to this lawsuit directly, but her participation reinforces the premeditation and severity of the grievance. Is Michael willing to formally testify under oath about what he heard in March? Completely willing. He was the one who came to tell me everything voluntarily. He's outraged by what they did. Excellent. I will need to meet with him as well to prepare his witness statement. This greatly strengthens the case because it shows you are not fabricating accusations out of spite, but that there is an independent witness to the facts. We spent another hour going over specific details, exact dates of transfers, precise descriptions of relevant conversations, the context of each significant interaction. James took meticulous notes, occasionally asking for clarification on a point. Finally, he closed his notebook. Mr. Moreno, I'm going to be completely honest with you. In 26 years of practicing family law, I've seen many cases of manipulative children, abandoned parents, extreme ingratitude, but I have rarely seen something as calculatedly cruel as what they did to you. The planning, the execution, the subsequent mockery. This goes beyond a simple family conflict. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I understand you are not seeking revenge. I see it in how you speak, in how you present the facts. You seek justice and boundaries. That's admirable. Many parents in your situation are paralyzed by guilt, wondering what they did wrong. You recognize that you gave everything you could give, and that the problem was not your insufficiency, but her choice. Exactly, I affirmed. For days, I tortured myself thinking about what I could have done differently, but I reviewed every memory, every interaction. I was a good father, not perfect, but dedicated, present, generous. If that wasn't enough for her, the flaw is in her value system, not in my parenting. James nodded with an almost paternal expression. That clarity will serve you well during the process. There will be difficult moments. When Sarah receives the lawsuit notification, she will probably try to contact you, perhaps with anger, perhaps with manipulative tears. You must be prepared to stand firm. I will be firm, I promised, and I meant it. We signed the legal services contract. I transferred the $3,500 in fees from my mobile phone right there. James gave me a copy of the contract and explained that he would have a draft of the lawsuit ready in a week for my review before filing it officially. I left the law firm at 5:15 in the afternoon. The May sun warmed the city streets. I walked towards the subway station feeling strangely light. For the first time since that morning of May 15th, I felt I had regained agency over my own life. I wasn't a victim waiting for compassion. I was a man taking action. That same night, after returning from the meeting with James Miller, I decided to do something I had been putting off: a thorough technical investigation of my financial records from the last 3 years. Not out of morbid curiosity, but because I needed to document every monetary interaction with Sarah for the legal case. I made strong coffee, opened my laptop, and accessed my online banking. I downloaded the account statements from January 2021 to May 2023, 30 PDF files containing every transaction I had made during that period. I created a new spreadsheet. Columns: date, amount, bank description, real reason according to my memory, additional notes. I began to methodically review each movement, specifically looking for transfers to Sarah's account. The first one I found was from the 3rd of February 2021, $800. Bank description. Transfer. I searched my text messages from that date to refresh my memory. I found the conversation. Sarah wrote that her refrigerator had broken down and she needed a new one urgently. She attached a photo of an old, indeed broken, refrigerator. I transferred the $800 that same day. She replied with a heart emoji. Nothing more, I noted in the spreadsheet. Supposedly broken refrigerator, unverified, minimal thanks. I continued reviewing. April 2021, $1,200. I checked messages. Sarah explained she needed to repair her work laptop, a problem with the motherboard. She attached a quote from a technician. It seemed legitimate. I transferred the money. This time there wasn't even an emoji response. Just a curt, "Okay, thanks." July 2021, $2,000. This one took me longer to remember. I looked in my call log. Indeed, there was a 38-minute call on July 23rd. I vaguely remembered Sarah crying, saying she had credit card debt from necessary work purchases, that if she didn't pay, it would affect her credit score. I worried about her financial future, transferred the $2,000 without questioning what necessary work purchases generated that level of debt. Now, with a cold perspective, I wondered if those debts really existed or if the money was used for something completely different. There was no way to verify it, but the emerging pattern made me doubt every story she had told me. October 2021, $500. Description: Sarah's birthday gift. This was legitimate. A voluntary gift from me for her 30th birthday. I didn't include it in the list of suspicious transactions because it was my initiative, not her request. January 2022, $1,800. I checked messages. Sarah explained she needed to renew a professional license and pay an annual fee for an administrators association. It sounded reasonable. I transferred the amount. A generic thank you via text, and then I got to the transaction that interested me most. The 11th of November, 2022, $12,000. Bank description: medical emergency for operation. I remembered this transaction vividly without needing to check messages. Sarah had called me on a Friday night, her voice broken, crying uncontrollably. She explained she had been having severe abdominal pain for weeks, that she had finally gone to a private gynecologist who diagnosed her with advanced endometriosis requiring urgent surgery. The procedure cost $14,000. She had $2,000 saved. She needed $12,000 more. The public health system had an 8-month waiting list. She couldn't wait that long with that level of pain. I, terrified at the thought of my daughter suffering from a serious illness, didn't hesitate for a second. I told her I would transfer the money first thing Monday morning. She cried. She thanked me profusely. She said, I don't know what I would do without you, Dad. You're my salvation. Those words rang hollow now. On Monday, November 14th, I transferred the $12,000. She confirmed receipt by message. Received. Surgery scheduled for November 22nd. I'll let you know how it goes, I replied, offering to accompany her to the hospital. Stay during the operation. Help her with her recovery. She declined. Don't worry. Daniel will be with me. It's a simple procedure. I'll be fine. I waited anxiously on November 22nd. I sent a message early in the morning wishing her luck. No response all day. I called in the evening. No answer. Finally, around 11 p.m., I received a short message. Everything went well. Resting. Talk in a few days. 2 weeks passed without news. When I finally called to check on her recovery, Sarah sounded perfectly normal, even energetic. She said the recovery had been faster than expected, that she was already back at work, that she felt completely fine. She never showed me medical documents. She never mentioned the name of the hospital. She never shared details of the procedure, and I, blindly trusting my daughter, never asked for evidence. Now, according to Michael, that money financed a luxury trip to the Maldives in December 2022. I searched Sarah's Instagram profile for posts from last December, and there they were. Photos of a paradise beach, a 5-star resort, romantic dinners, water activities. The photos were dated from December 7th to 18th, 11 days in the Maldives. I quickly researched the average cost of that type of trip, a resort similar to the one shown in the photos. Between $8,000 and $12,000 per couple for 11 days, including flights, accommodation, and meals. Exactly the range of the money she had asked me for. I downloaded every photo from that trip. I saved them in a separate folder labeled Medical Fraud Evidence. I took screenshots showing the publication dates. I documented everything meticulously. The level of premeditation in that lie left me cold. It hadn't been an impulse. It had been an elaborate plan. Invent a specific illness. Create a sense of urgency. Exploit my natural fear of my daughter suffering. Extract a significant amount of money. Use that money for personal luxury. Lie about a non-existent surgery. Keep up the charade for weeks. That required an emotional coldness I didn't think my daughter possessed. But the evidence didn't lie. I continued reviewing subsequent transactions. March 2023. $900. Description: car repair. Verifiable if it was real, but at this point, I doubted everything. May 2023. $500. Description: wedding gift. I had voluntarily transferred this days before the supposed wedding date before discovering the deception. That money was lost too. I added up all the transfers to Sarah from January 2021 to May 2023. The total was devastating, $22,300 in just over 2 years. Almost $10,000 a year. That's not even counting the $140,000 apartment I had gifted her in 2019. In total, over the last 4 years, I had transferred more than $160,000 to my daughter between the property gift and various forms of help, and in return, I received exclusion from her wedding and public humiliation. I printed the entire spreadsheet. I printed all the relevant bank statements. I printed the screenshots of the Maldives trip. I organized everything into subfolders within the main file I would take to James Miller. While I was working on this, around midnight, my phone vibrated. A message from Michael. Dad, Sarah just posted new photos on Instagram. They're back from their honeymoon. You should see the comments. I opened Instagram. Indeed, Sarah had uploaded an album of 30 photos from her honeymoon. Greece, Santorini specifically. Spectacular sunsets, boutique hotels, gourmet meals, private yacht rides. Every image screamed luxury and exclusivity. The comments were predictable. So jealous. Perfect couple. Living the dream. But there was one specific comment that caught my attention. It was from Susan Rubio, Daniel's mother. My children deserve the best. Thank God they found families who understand the value of excellence. Families who understand the value of excellence. Translation: families with money. Families that don't include warehouse coordinators like me. I saved a screenshot of that comment too. Not because it was legally relevant, but because it perfectly crystallized the mindset that had motivated my exclusion. I closed the computer after 1 in the morning. I had everything documented. Every dollar transferred. Every lie detected. Every pattern of manipulation identified. James Miller had said the case was solid. Now it was more than solid. It was irrefutable. I went to sleep that night with a strange feeling. It wasn't peace exactly. It was crystallized determination. Sarah had played with my emotions for years. She had perfected the art of extracting resources while giving minimal affection in return. That game was over. Now we would follow different rules. Legal rules. Rules with real consequences. And, in that game, I held all the winning cards. On Tuesday, May 30th, exactly 2 weeks after the wedding from which I was excluded, James Miller emailed me the complete draft of the lawsuit. It was 23 pages of meticulous legal argumentation. That afternoon, after finishing my workday, I sat in a coffee shop near my apartment to read it with absolute attention. The document was impressive. James had structured the case into 4 main sections: family background, establishing my role as a dedicated father, a detailed timeline of the property gift, exhaustive evidence of the acts of manifest ingratitude, and the legal basis according to the law. Every statement was backed by attached documentation. Every argument flowed logically to the inevitable conclusion. The revocation was completely justified. I replied to the email that same night. Impeccable document. Proceed with the official filing. On Thursday, June 1st, James formally filed the lawsuit. He sent me a photo of the reception stamp as confirmation. The official process begins now, he wrote. The notification will reach your daughter in approximately 5 to 7 business days. Those days of waiting were strangely calm. I continued with my normal routine: work, gym 3 times a week, nightly readings, occasional calls with an AI. He kept me informed about movements in the family circle. Sarah and Daniel had returned from Greece radiant, constantly posting about their perfect life. Linda commented on every post with heart emojis. The Rubios also actively participated in this digital theater of family happiness. None of them knew what was coming. On Wednesday, June 7th, at 11:15 at night, my phone exploded. An incoming call from Sarah. I declined. She immediately called back. I declined again. Then came a barrage of messages. Dad, answer the phone now. What the hell is this? I got a lawsuit from you. You're insane. Call me immediately. 6 messages in 2 minutes. Then she tried a video call. I declined it. My phone vibrated with a call from an unknown number. Probably Daniel. I didn't answer. Another call from Linda's number. I didn't answer that either. Finally, at 11:30, I wrote a single message to Sarah. Everything I had to say to you is in the legal document you received. My lawyer will handle communication from now on. Do not contact me directly. Her response was immediate and furious. You are a miserable man. After everything I did for you, how dare you do this to me? You're going to take my house away over a stupid misunderstanding with the wedding date. You're sick in the head. You are a pathetic and resentful father. I read the message with clinical detachment. Every word confirmed exactly what James had predicted. Anger, denial of responsibility, blame-shifting, victimhood. Sarah was following the classic playbook of a manipulator confronted with consequences. I didn't respond. I blocked her phone number. I blocked her on WhatsApp. I blocked her social media. Total communication cut off. 30 minutes later, Michael called me. Dad, Sarah just called me, hysterical. She says you're suing her for the apartment. She says you're crazy, that she did nothing wrong, that it's all a misunderstanding. She asked me to intercede, to convince you to drop the lawsuit. And what did you tell her? I asked calmly. I told her the truth, that I was the one who told you about the deliberate planning of your exclusion. that there is no misunderstanding, that she made decisions and now she must face the consequences. She started screaming, called me a traitor, said I was always your favorite. Then she hung up. She probably won't speak to me ever again. I detected pain in my son's voice. I'm sorry, Michael. I didn't want you to lose your relationship with your sister over this. I'm not losing it because of this, he replied firmly. I lost it the day she decided to publicly humiliate you, and I decided I have limits on what behaviors I tolerate in my family. I did the right thing. I'm at peace with it. I felt proud of that 8-year-old young man who had developed such a solid moral backbone. I love you, son. Thank you for your integrity. I love you, Dad. Stay strong. She will try all sorts of tactics. Don't give in. We hung up. I made myself some chamomile tea to calm my slightly agitated nervous system from the indirect confrontation. I knew this was just the beginning. James had warned me that Sarah would try multiple strategies before accepting the reality of the situation. Over the next 3 days, contact attempts continued from different numbers. I blocked each one systematically. I received an email from an account I didn't recognize, probably created specifically to bypass my blocks. The message was long, alternating between dramatic pleas. Dad, please, don't do this to me. It's my home, and venomous attacks. You've always been resentful for not having what others have. I forwarded the email to James without replying. He wrote back, typical. Save everything. It can be useful to demonstrate her pattern of emotional manipulation. On Monday, June 12th, James informed me that Sarah's lawyer had made formal contact. His name was Edward Ruiz. He requested a meeting to explore options for an out-of-court resolution of the conflict. You mean a settlement? I asked James over the phone. Exactly, they'll try to negotiate. They'll probably offer to return the $12,000 from the fraudulent loan if you drop the lawsuit over the apartment. It's a predictable move. What's your recommendation? It depends on your goals. If you're only looking to recover money, a settlement could be pragmatic. But if you're looking for a consequence proportional to the grievance, a settlement would be insufficient. They keep the $140,000 apartment. They learn that abusive behavior has a minor, tolerable cost. And you're left with a partial victory that doesn't send a clear message. I don't want a settlement, I said without hesitation. I want the lawsuit to run its full course. I want there to be a hearing. I want a judge to hear the whole story. I want there to be a public legal record of what they did. And I want a judgment that sets a clear precedent. Humiliating the person who gave you everything has total consequences, not partial ones. Understood. I will inform Mr. Ruiz that there is no interest in negotiation. That afternoon, I received a call from Thomas Rubio's number, Daniel's father. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. His tone was condescending, authoritarian. David, this is Thomas Rubio. We need to talk like rational men about this absurd situation. Sarah made a minor mistake with the invitation date, but your reaction is completely disproportionate. You're trying to steal your own daughter's home out of spite. That speaks very poorly of your character. Call me to resolve this civilly before it becomes a public scandal that nobody wants. I deleted the message before he finished. The arrogance of that man was astonishing. A minor mistake with the date, as if deliberately excluding a father from his daughter's wedding was equivalent to mixing up a dental appointment time. That night, while I was having dinner alone in my apartment, I reflected on the arguments they were all using. Sarah called me resentful. Thomas accused me of spite. Linda had sent a message to Michael saying I was vengeful and cruel. All of them framed my legal action as the product of uncontrolled negative emotions. None of them mentioned the original humiliation. None of them acknowledged the deliberate planning of my exclusion. None of them accepted responsibility for years of financial manipulation. They had all rewritten the narrative, positioning themselves as victims of an irrational father. That inversion of reality was, in a way, more offensive than the exclusion itself. They denied me even the right to the correct name for my experience. My pain was redefined as resentment. My search for justice was labeled as revenge. My healthy boundary was characterized as cruelty. But I no longer needed them to validate my perspective. I had complete documentation, a credible witness, a solid legal foundation. Above all, I had absolute clarity about what was right. On Thursday, June 15th, an official notification arrived from the court. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for September 8th, 2023. 3 months to wait. James explained that this time would allow both parties to prepare arguments, present additional evidence, if any, and formulate a strategy. "How are you feeling?" James asked me at the end of the call. "Calm," I replied honestly. "For the first time in weeks, completely calm. That tranquility comes from having taken action consistent with your values," the lawyer observed. "Many people never reach that point. They get stuck in cycles of victimhood. You broke the cycle." We hung up. I sat on my small balcony, looking at the city lights on the June night. The air was warm, almost perfectly temperate. Sarah had gravely underestimated her father. She had assumed I would accept any mistreatment with resigned silence. She had gambled that my unconditional love meant infinite tolerance. She would learn she was wrong. Love has limits, and she had just crossed all of mine. September 8th, 2023, dawned with a clear sky and pleasant temperature. I woke up at 6 a.m. without needing an alarm. I had slept deeply without nightmares or anxiety. I showered calmly. I shaved carefully. I dressed in the same navy blue suit I had bought for the wedding I never attended. This time, it was not a symbol of illusion, but of recovered dignity. I had toast with olive oil and black coffee for breakfast. I reviewed the folder with all my documentation one last time, although I knew it by heart. I left my apartment at 8:15. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the courthouse downtown. I arrived 40 minutes early. James Miller was already waiting for me in the lobby of the judicial building. He carried a professional leather briefcase and wore a confident expression. "Good morning, David." "Ready?" he greeted me, shaking my hand firmly. "Completely ready," I replied in a steady voice. We went up to the 3rd floor. The courtroom was formal but not intimidating. Beige walls, rows of wooden benches for the public, an elevated bench where the judge would sit, tables for the opposing parties. We were the first to arrive. At 9:50, the door opened and they entered. First Sarah, dressed in a dark gray pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a perfect bun, discreet makeup. She seemed to have aged 5 years and 3 months. She had pronounced dark circles under her eyes, a tense expression. Behind her came Daniel, in a black suit and blue tie, his face serious. Following them was Edward Ruiz, their lawyer, a man in his 60s, bald, with metal-framed glasses. Sarah saw me and her face transformed. First surprise, then something that looked like genuine pain, finally contained anger. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but Edward Ruiz put a hand on her shoulder and shook his head. She closed her mouth and sat at her table without a word. At 10 o'clock sharp, the court clerk announced, "All rise." We all stood up. The judge entered, a woman of about 50, with short graying hair, a black robe, a serious but not severe expression. She sat at her bench and briefly reviewed the documents in front of her. "You may be seated," she indicated. "Case number 2023 to 4512. David Moreno versus Sarah Ortega. Lawsuit for revocation of gift due to manifest ingratitude. Counsel for the plaintiff. Identify yourself." James stood up. James Miller, representing Mr. David Moreno. Counsel for the defendant. Edward Ruiz stood up. Edward Ruiz, representing Miss Sarah Ortega. The judge nodded. "We will proceed in the established order. Counsel for the plaintiff. State the facts and grounds of your complaint." James stood up with impeccable professional posture. For 25 minutes he presented the case with surgical precision. He began by establishing context. A dedicated father. Documented sacrifices for 32 years. A generous gift of a property valued at $140,000 as an early wedding gift. Then he described the events of May 15th, the altered invitation, the premeditated exclusion, the public humiliation. While James spoke, he projected onto a digital screen the invitation I had received, clearly showing May 15th. Then he showed screenshots from social media with verifiable dates of May 14th, showing the actual wedding. The visual contrast was devastating. Your Honor, James continued, this was not an innocent mistake. It was a calculated act of cruelty, specifically designed to exclude my client from the most important moment in his daughter's life. A moment he had dreamed of and waited for decades. A moment for which he had sacrificed everything. He then projected the bank statements, showing the transfer of $12,000 for a medical emergency operation, dated November 2022. Then he showed the photographs of Sarah and Daniel in the Maldives in December of that same year. Miss Ortega invented a non-existent illness to extract $12,000 from her father, James explained in a controlled but firm tone. Money she used for a luxury vacation while her father, a man of limited means, genuinely believed he was saving his daughter's health. This is a clear pattern of systematic financial and emotional manipulation. Edward Ruiz stood up. Objection, Your Honor. There is no medical proof that the operation did not occur. The travel photographs do not prove fraud. The judge looked at him coldly. Mr. Ruiz, your client can provide hospital documentation if the operation indeed occurred. Does she have medical records, hospital bills, a surgical report? Edward looked at Sarah. She shook her head almost imperceptibly. The lawyer replied, We do not have that documentation available at this time, Your Honor. Then the objection is noted but not sustained. Continue, Mr. Miller. James proceeded by presenting the written testimony of Michael Moreno, my younger son, who had formally declared under oath that he had overheard the deliberate planning of my exclusion in a conversation between Sarah, Linda, Thomas Rubio, and Susan Rubio in March 2023. The document included specific details, the exact date, place, participants, and verbatim quotes of what he heard. We have here a direct witness to the premeditation, James emphasized. This was not an impulsive decision. It was a family conspiracy executed over months with the specific goal of publicly humiliating my client for classist reasons related to his socioeconomic status. He finally projected Susan Rubio's comment on Instagram. My children deserve the best. Thank God they found families who understand the value of excellence. James left that sentence on the screen for several seconds. This comment reveals the underlying mentality, he said. My client was not considered excellent enough to participate in the wedding. His honest job as a warehouse coordinator, his modest life, were seen as an embarrassment that needed to be hidden. Miss Ortega chose image over integrity. She chose status over filial love. She chose to appear perfect over honoring the man who gave her everything. A heavy silence fell in the room. I glanced briefly at Sarah. Tears were running down her cheeks, but her expression was hard, resentful, not repentant. James concluded, Your Honor, according to the law and established jurisprudence, manifest ingratitude justifies the revocation of gifts. Here we have ingratitude in its purest form, deliberate grievance, financial manipulation, systematic contempt. We request that the revocation of the gifted property be declared appropriate, and that the restitution of the $12,000 obtained fraudulently be ordered, plus corresponding interest and monetary correction. He sat down. The judge made notes in her file. Then she looked at Edward Ruiz. Counsel for the defendant, you have the floor for your defense. Edward stood up. His strategy was predictable. Minimize. Your Honor, what we have here is a family conflict magnified disproportionately. There was indeed confusion with the invitation date. Regrettable, but not malicious. My client accepts responsibility for not verifying that her father had the correct information. However, there is a huge leap from that to accusing her of a deliberate conspiracy. He argued that Michael's testimony was biased because I was his father and he would obviously take my side. That the Maldives photos didn't prove there was no operation, only that they traveled afterward. That my lawsuit was the product of excessive sensitivity and disproportionate resentment. My client made mistakes, Edward admitted. But mistakes do not constitute legal ingratitude sufficient to strip her of her home. Miss Ortega is willing to formally apologize and return the $12,000 in question if that resolves the conflict. But taking away the apartment where she lives with her husband is an excessively severe punishment. He sat down. Sarah nodded vigorously, as if supporting her lawyer's version. The judge looked at both parties. Are there any witnesses present for oral testimony? James replied, Your Honor, Michael Moreno is available if the court requires him. Have him come in. Michael, who had been waiting outside, entered. He looked nervous but determined. He was sworn in to tell the truth. The judge asked him to relate exactly what he heard in March. My son spoke with a clear voice. I went to my mother Linda's house on March 18th of this year to pick up some documents. I had a key. I went in without announcing myself. I heard a conversation in the living room. My sister Sarah, my mother, Thomas Rubio, and his wife Susan were discussing the wedding. I specifically heard Thomas say, We'll give him the wrong date and the matter is settled. No one has to know there's a penniless father. My mother laughed. Sarah said, This wedding is important for Daniel's image. We can't have pictures with. You know, she didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Edward tried to discredit him with questions, but Michael maintained absolute consistency in every detail. The hearing lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. At the end, the judge closed her file. I will deliver a verdict within 30 days. This session is adjourned. We left the courtroom. Sarah tried to approach, but James stepped in between. Miss Ortega, there is nothing to discuss outside the legal process. She looked at me with pure hatred. I hope you're happy, destroying your own daughter. I didn't answer. I turned and walked out of the building. Outside, under the September sun, James told me, You did very well. You maintained a perfect composure. How do you see the outcome? I asked. Very favorable. The judge asked questions that indicated skepticism toward the defense. I believe we will have a positive judgment. He was right, but that would come later. After James's technical presentation of evidence, the judge looked directly at me. Her expression had subtly changed. It was no longer the professional neutrality from the beginning. There was something more human in her eyes. Mr. Moreno, she said in a voice that filled the room, do you wish to make a personal statement to this court about the facts motivating your lawsuit? I stood up slowly. I felt all eyes fixed on me. The judge, the lawyers, the court clerk, Sarah, Daniel. James had prepared me for this moment for weeks. Speak from the heart, he had advised me, but maintain control. Show pain without theatrics, dignity without arrogance. Yes, Your Honor, I would like to speak, I replied. I walked to the central lectern where a microphone was installed. I took a deep breath. The words I had mentally rehearsed for months would finally have a space to exist. My name is David Moreno. I am 64 years old. I have worked my entire life in honest jobs that never made me rich, but always allowed me to support my family with dignity. I am not a man of many fancy words. I am a man of actions, and for 32 years, my actions toward my daughter Sarah were of absolute and unconditional love. My voice came out firm but laden with contained emotion. I looked at Sarah as I spoke. She avoided my gaze. When Sarah was born in July 1991, I held that tiny creature in my arms and swore she would never lack for anything. I kept that promise. I worked 2 jobs simultaneously for 8 years to pay for her private school. I slept 4 hours a day. My body aged prematurely from the exhaustion. But every time I saw her smile, every time she brought home good grades, every time she hugged me and said, "Thank you, Dad," all the tiredness disappeared. I took a crumpled envelope from my inner jacket pocket. I held it up so everyone could see. This is a letter Sarah wrote to me when she was 15. I have kept it for 17 years. With your permission, Your Honor, I would like to read a fragment. The judge nodded. Go ahead. I opened the envelope with slightly trembling hands. I unfolded the sheet with teenage handwriting and purple ink. I read aloud, Dad, today in class they asked us to write about our hero. Everyone wrote about soccer players or singers. I wrote about you. You are my hero because you work so hard so I can go to a good school, because you always have time for me, even when you're tired, because you teach me that money doesn't make people valuable, their actions do. I love you, Dad. You're the best dad in the whole world. The silence in the room was absolute. I carefully refolded the letter with reverence and put it away. When I looked up, I saw that the judge had a visibly moved expression. That 15-year-old girl existed, I continued. That girl who saw me as a hero was real. Her words were genuine. For years, I believed that that girl had simply grown up and become a busy adult with her own life. I justified her growing distance. It's normal, I told myself. Children become independent, but it wasn't independence that was happening. It was a transformation into someone who no longer recognized me as a father worthy of respect. I took another document from my folder, a photograph. This is a photo from her college graduation in 2013, her hugging me with a huge smile. Me, proud next to her. That university cost every dollar I could save for 4 years. I sold my car. I delayed repairs on my apartment. I ate rice and tuna 4 days a week to cut costs. But seeing her receive that degree made every sacrifice worth it. That day she told me, "Dad, I did it thanks to you. I will never forget what you did for me." I left the photo on the table in front of the judge. My voice was beginning to break, but I remained firm. Apparently, she did forget, because years later, when I had my life savings, I bought her a $140,000 apartment. It was literally all I had. I left only $13,000 for myself for emergencies. I put that property in her name with no conditions other than it being her home when she got married. She cried with happiness. She hugged me. She told me I was the best father anyone could ask for. I paused. I took a deep breath to control the lump in my throat. And then, when that marriage finally came, when the moment I had waited for decades arrived, the moment to walk her down the aisle, as we had dreamed together since she was a teenager, they gave me an invitation with the wrong date, intentionally, deliberately, so that I would arrive at an empty hall, so that I would miss the ceremony, so that her husband's rich father-in-law would take my place in the photographs, so that I would be erased from the narrative of her perfect life. Because my modest job, my small apartment, my simple life, did not fit with the image they wanted to project. I looked directly at Sarah. This time she held my gaze. There were tears in her eyes, but also hardness. I arrived that May 15th with a new suit I had bought especially with white flowers, her favorite, with a prepared speech I had written and rewritten 17 times, with an envelope containing $5,000 saved over 6 months of overtime as a gift for her and Daniel. I arrived with a heart full of love and pride, and I found locked gates, an empty place, silence. My voice finally broke slightly. I took a moment to compose myself. When I called her, desperate, she laughed. She laughed at my confusion, laughed at my pain. She told me, "Oops, the wedding was yesterday. What a shame you missed it." As if it were a funny joke, as if destroying a lifelong dream was an innocent prank. Then I opened social media and saw photo after photo of a beautiful wedding where Thomas Rubio, a man I barely know, was in my place, enjoying the moment that should have been mine. And in no photo, no comment, no post, was there any sign that anyone asked about me. It was as if I had never existed. I took the last document from my folder, the bank statements. This shows every transfer I made to Sarah over the last few years. Not just the apartment, but also constant help. $800 for a refrigerator, $1,000, $200 for a laptop, $2,000 for credit card debt, and here, $12,000 that she asked me for in November 2022, crying desperately because she needed urgent gynecological surgery. I, terrified that my daughter was sick, transferred that money without hesitation. It turns out there was no operation. That money paid for a luxury vacation in the Maldives. She invented a non-existent illness to steal from me, because at that point that's what I was to her, a source of resources that could be manipulated with fake tears. I closed the folder. I looked at the judge directly. "Your Honor, I am not here for revenge. I am here because for 32 years I gave unconditional love, and the only thing I asked for in return was basic respect. I did not ask for eternal gratitude. I did not ask for Sarah to live dedicated to pleasing me. I only asked that she treat me as a dignified human being, and she chose to treat me as an embarrassment to be hidden. She chose to publicly humiliate me. She chose to lie to me, to steal from me. She chose to erase me from the most important moment of her life. My voice regained total firmness for the final words. This court cannot give me back the day I lost. It cannot erase the humiliation I suffered. It cannot repair the wound of knowing that my daughter despises me for not being rich enough. But it can establish that actions have consequences, that abusing a father's kindness does not come for free, that human dignity has a value that must be legally protected. That is why I am here. I am not destroying my daughter. She destroyed the relationship we had. I am simply setting a boundary where I should have set one years ago. I returned to my seat. The silence in the room was dense, almost palpable. I saw the court clerk discreetly wipe her eyes with a tissue. The judge was writing notes with a serious and concentrated expression. Edward Ruiz stood up. Your Honor, I request a brief recess. Granted. 15 minutes. During the recess, Sarah broke down crying in Daniel's arms outside the courtroom. But even then, as Michael told me later, he heard her say, "How can he do this to me? I'm his daughter," still believing that being my daughter gave her a perpetual right to mistreat me without consequences. That would be her hardest lesson. On October 8, 2023, exactly 1 month after the hearing, I received a call from James Miller at 10:15 in the morning. I was at my job in the warehouse, coordinating the quarterly inventory, when I saw his name on my phone screen. "David, I have the verdict," he said without preamble. His voice sounded professionally neutral, but I detected contained satisfaction. "It's a complete ruling in your favor. The judge grants full revocation of the property gift plus restitution of the $12,000 with legal interest and monetary correction since November 2022. The updated amount is $12,930. I had to sit down. I had expected this result. James had prepared me for a high probability of success, but hearing the official words hit me with unexpected force. "When is it effective?" I asked. "The judgment becomes final in 15 business days, unless the defendant appeals to the provincial court. But even if they appeal, I doubt it will succeed. The ruling is very solidly founded." The judge dedicated 18 pages to the argumentation. She cites extensive case law, analyzes every piece of evidence presented, systematically dismantles all of the defense's arguments. It's a model judgment. I want to read the full document. I'm emailing it to you right now, but I'll give you the most relevant parts. The judge wrote, and I quote, "The deliberate exclusion of the father from the wedding ceremony through premeditated deception constitutes a grievance of exceptional gravity that fully justifies the application of the law. The defendant's behavior demonstrates a systematic pattern of emotional and economic manipulation of her parent, exploiting paternal generosity for material benefit, while denying basic human recognition." James paused to read more. She also writes, "It is particularly revealing that the defendant invented a serious illness to obtain $12,000, allegedly for urgent medical surgery, while actually using those funds for a luxury vacation. This act not only constitutes fraud, but calculated cruelty toward a father who genuinely feared for his daughter's health. The court considers this fact especially aggravating to the manifest ingratitude." I closed my eyes, feeling an overwhelming validation. Someone with legal authority had heard my full story and had confirmed what I knew. I wasn't exaggerating. I wasn't being overly sensitive. I wasn't seeking irrational revenge. I had been genuinely mistreated, and my response was proportional and just. "What's next?" I asked. "The defendant will be notified within 48 hours. They have 15 business days to appeal or to begin voluntary compliance with the judgment. If they don't appeal and comply voluntarily, Sarah and Daniel must vacate the property and transfer the ownership back to your name, in addition to paying the $12,930. If they don't comply voluntarily, we proceed with forced execution of the judgment." "How long do they have to vacate?" "They are usually granted 30 days from when the judgment is final. Considering they renovated the property and live there, the time frame is reasonable for them to find alternative housing." That afternoon, after finishing my workday, I read the full judgment in my apartment. 18 pages of meticulous legal analysis. The judge had examined every piece of evidence we presented. She quoted my testimony extensively, especially the part about Sarah's letter at 15 and the brutal contrast with her current behavior. On page 12, there was a paragraph that particularly struck me. The court observes that the plaintiff seeks neither enrichment nor revenge. He seeks the restoration of his violated dignity. The original gift was an act of generous paternal love. The revocation is not an arbitrary punishment, but an appropriate legal consequence in the face of ingratitude that reached intolerable levels of cruelty. Family relationships, although protected by law, do not grant a license for impunity. Adult children have a responsibility to treat their parents with minimum respect, especially when those parents have demonstrated constant dedication for decades. The judgment concluded, "For all the foregoing, this court rules. First, the revocation of the gift of the property located in the nice part of town, made by David Moreno in favor of Sarah Ortega in April 2019, is declared appropriate. Second, the immediate restitution of said property to the plaintiff's estate is ordered. Third, the defendant is ordered to pay $12,930 corresponding to the fraudulent loan, plus interest and monetary correction. Fourth, the court costs are awarded to the defendant. The parties are to be notified." I saved the document in my personal folder. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. 2 days later, on October 10th, Michael called me. "Dad," Sarah received the judgment. "She's devastated," she called Mom, crying. "Daniel is furious." They spoke with their lawyer, Edward Ruiz, about appealing, but apparently he told them that appealing would be wasting money on a lost battle. The judgment is too solid. "Are they going to comply voluntarily?" I asked. "I don't know. Daniel wants to appeal anyway out of pride, but they have a serious problem. They took out a $60,000 bank loan to remodel the apartment 6 months ago. That loan was used to expand the kitchen, renovate the bathrooms, install new floors. Now they lose the property, but the debt remains. And on top of that, they have to pay the $12,930 from the judgment, plus the court costs, which, according to Edward, are approximately $3,000. They are facing financial ruin. I felt no joy at this news. I wasn't seeking sadism, but I didn't feel guilt either. They had made the decision to renovate a property that could legally be revoked. They had gambled that I would never act. They had miscalculated. On October 22nd, James informed me that there was no appeal. The deadline expired at midnight today. The judgment is final. They now have 30 calendar days to vacate the property and transfer the deeds. They must also pay the monetary restitution. During those 30 days, Sarah tried to contact me through third parties. She sent messages with Michael. "Tell Dad to please reconsider. We have nowhere to live. We're desperate." Michael relayed the messages to me, but I maintained my position. The judgment is final. They must comply with it. I also received a call from Linda's number, my ex-wife. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail full of insults. "You're a monster. Leaving your own daughter on the street because of a wounded ego. You were always a small man with a miserable soul. I hope you can live with your conscience." I deleted the message before she finished. On November 5th, while organizing documents in my apartment, I made an additional decision. I called my lawyer. "James, I want to update my will. I need to completely remove Sarah as a beneficiary. Everything should go to Michael. Are you completely sure? It's a permanent decision that will affect your family legacy." "Completely sure." Michael showed loyalty, integrity, and courage by testifying to the truth, even knowing he would lose his relationship with his sister. Sarah showed that she sees me only as a source of resources. I don't trust her to use an inheritance in a way I would approve of. Michael will use it well. 2 days later, I signed a new will before a notary. A simple and clear document. I institute as the sole universal heir of all my assets, rights, and actions my son, Michael Moreno. I expressly disinherit my daughter, Sarah Ortega, for serious causes of mistreatment and lack of respect, in accordance with applicable law. On November 20th, the last day of the eviction period, Sarah and Daniel handed over the keys to the apartment through Edward Ruiz. There was no personal meeting. The lawyer also delivered a certified check for $12,930. The court costs were paid directly to the court. James accompanied me to receive the keys. We visited the apartment together. It was empty, clean, with the expensive renovations they had installed intact. A modern granite kitchen, renovated bathrooms with premium finishes, natural wood floors. Ironically, they had increased the value of the property they now lost. "What will you do with the property?" James asked as we walked through the empty rooms. "Sell it. I don't want to live here. Too many bitter memories. I'll sell it and use the money for my retirement and to help Michael when he starts his own family." I hired a real estate agency. They listed the apartment for $165,000, reflecting the improvements made by Sarah and Daniel. It sold in 3 weeks to a young professional couple. 183, nil net after commissions. With that money, plus the $12,930 recovered, plus my existing savings, I had a net worth of almost $200,000, enough for a dignified retirement and to leave a decent inheritance to Michael. But the most valuable thing wasn't the money. It was having recovered something I had lost for years: self-respect. I had established a clear boundary. I had shown that a father's love does not mean infinite tolerance for mistreatment. I had taught a lesson that Sarah would never forget, and I had found peace. March 2024. 6 months after the final judgment, I was sitting on the terrace of a coffee shop with Michael on a mild spring afternoon. My son had specifically requested this meeting because he had information about Sarah that he thought I should know. "Dad," Michael began, stirring sugar into his cup. "Sarah and Daniel. Well, they're having a hard time. They had to move. They're renting a small place now in a working-class neighborhood." "What apartment?" I asked. I had not intentionally followed their movements. I had cut off all informational ties with that part of my life. After the eviction, they rented a small 2-bedroom place in an old building, nothing like their old place. But even that rent was unsustainable for them. The $60,000 bank loan they took out for the renovations has monthly payments of $1,200. Between that, the rent, and normal expenses, they just couldn't make it. Daniel had to sell his car. Sarah canceled her gym membership, stopped going to restaurants, eliminated all the luxuries she had. Still, it wasn't enough. Michael took a sip of coffee before continuing. Last week, they had to sell the jewelry Sarah had received as wedding gifts. Gold earrings, a pearl necklace, a small diamond bracelet. They sold it all at a pawn shop. They got about $8,000. They used that money to pay overdue installments on the bank loan because the bank had already sent them foreclosure warnings. I processed this information without any particular emotion. It wasn't joy I felt, nor was it pity. It was simply the knowledge of natural consequences unfolding logically. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Sarah called Mom crying 4 days ago. Mom called me, asking me to intercede with you, to ask you to reconsider, to give them the apartment back. I told her that was impossible, that the property is already sold to third parties. Mom became hysterical. She called me a traitor again. Then Sarah called me directly. It was a horrible conversation, Dad. She was screaming, crying, saying I had destroyed her life by testifying against her. I reminded her that I only told the truth about what I heard, that she destroyed her own life with her cruel decisions. What did she say to that? She said it was just a joke, that the wedding exclusion was the Rubioses' idea, and she just went along with it to avoid conflict, that she never imagined you would take it so seriously, that you're too sensitive, that you ruined her life out of wounded pride. I shook my head slowly. She still doesn't get it. She still thinks the problem was my reaction, not her actions. She still doesn't accept real responsibility. Exactly, Michael confirmed. I told her, Sarah, you planned for months to exclude Dad from your wedding. You lied to him about a medical operation to steal $12,000 from him. You treated him like an embarrassment to be hidden. Those were not innocent mistakes. They were conscious and cruel decisions. The consequences you're facing now are a direct result of your own choices. She was quiet for a few seconds and then said, "You don't understand the pressure I was under. The Rubios are important people. They had expectations." As if that justified everything. I watched the people passing by on the street. Mothers with strollers, elderly people walking slowly, young people laughing on their way to some destination, ordinary life continuing normally, while my family had imploded over decisions that should never have been made. "There's more," Michael continued with an uncomfortable expression. "Linda is also having a hard time. Apparently her family, the uncles and cousins who were always so smug about their money and status, have completely distanced themselves after the trial. They consider the public scandal of the legal case to be shameful. That being exposed as a family that mistreats a dedicated father ruined their social reputation. Mom is practically isolated. She only has Sarah. And Sarah is so deep in her own problems that she can't offer emotional support to anyone." "And the Rubios?" I asked. "How did they react?" "Ah, that's the most interesting part. Thomas and Susan Rubio significantly distanced themselves from Sarah and Daniel after they lost the trial. At first, they offered to lend them money to appeal, but when Edward Ruiz told them it was useless, they withdrew their support. Then, when Sarah and Daniel asked for help to pay the bank loan, Thomas offered them a family loan but with 5% annual interest and a notarized guarantee. Basically, he treated them like business clients, not family. Daniel felt betrayed. There was a huge fight between him and his father. Now they barely speak. The irony was almost perfect. Sarah had sacrificed her relationship with me to impress the Rubios, and now the Rubios were treating her with the same transactional coldness she had treated me with for years. "Is Sarah working?" I asked. "Yes. She never left her job at the marketing company, but her salary is insufficient to cover all the debts. Plus, the stress has affected her job performance. According to what she told me, she was almost fired last month for repeated mistakes in an important campaign. She managed to keep her job, but she's on probation. One more mistake and she's fired." Michael looked at me directly. "Dad, I know this is hard to hear, but I thought you should know the full situation. I also need to ask you something. Do you ever regret going all the way with the trial?" I thought carefully before answering. It was a legitimate question that deserved an honest answer. "I don't regret it," I finally said with absolute certainty. "Listen, Michael, I don't enjoy Sarah's suffering. I don't celebrate her financial difficulties. I'm not a vengeful person who finds pleasure in others' pain. But I also can't carry the guilt for consequences she brought upon herself. I didn't force her to plan my exclusion from her wedding. I didn't force her to lie to me about an invented illness. I didn't force her to take out a $60,000 loan to renovate an apartment she could legally lose. All of those were her decisions. I drank my coffee, which was now lukewarm. What I did was set a boundary I should have set years ago, when the first signs of manipulation and contempt began. Tolerating mistreatment is not love. It's cowardice disguised as virtue. True, healthy love includes consequences when behavior crosses unacceptable lines. "I completely agree," Michael affirmed. "I just wanted to make sure you were too, because I think eventually Sarah might try to reach out, maybe in a few years, when she's processed all this, and you need to be prepared to decide how to respond if that happens." I considered that possibility. If Sarah ever comes with a genuine apology, not a performative one, but a real one, specifically acknowledging every harm she caused, without justifications or excuses, admitting that her actions were cruel and that the consequences were deserved, then I will be willing to listen. I don't guarantee we'll restore a full relationship, but I will listen. However, if she comes only because she needs something, or because she wants to alleviate her own guilt, or because she hopes that time has erased what she did, then the answer will be no. "That seems fair," Michael said. We paid for the coffee and walked together to the subway. Before we parted, Michael hugged me. "Dad, I'm proud of you. I know this has been incredibly difficult, but you maintained your dignity throughout the whole process. Many men in your situation would have collapsed, or reacted with violence, or sunk into depression. You handled everything with intelligence, with composure, and with solid principles. I learned something important from all of this, I told him. I learned that we can love our children deeply and at the same time recognize when they are harming us. Those two truths can coexist. I don't have to choose between loving Sarah and respecting myself. I can do both by setting firm boundaries. We said goodbye. I returned to my apartment as the March sun began to set. I prepared a simple dinner. Then I sat on my small balcony with a book I was reading, a biography of Nelson Mandela. There was a passage that particularly struck me. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. I thought about that for a long time. I didn't feel resentment. I felt peace. I had acted with justice, not with hatred. I had sought appropriate consequences, not disproportionate destruction. Sarah lost the apartment, yes, but I lost 32 years believing I was building a relationship of mutual love, when in reality I was being used. Who lost more? The difference was that I had recovered my dignity. I had learned a valuable lesson about healthy boundaries. I had proven to myself that I had a moral backbone, even when it hurt to use it. Sarah, if she learned anything from this experience, could eventually become a better person. She could develop real empathy, value human relationships over social appearances, understand that actions have consequences. If that happened, this painful experience would have been transformative for her. But if she learned nothing, if she continued to blame others for the results of her own decisions, then she would live trapped in a perpetual cycle of victimhood. That would be her choice, not my responsibility. I closed the book. I looked at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I had done the right thing, and finally, after months of turmoil, I had found something priceless. Inner peace. Not the false peace that comes from avoiding necessary conflict, but the true peace that comes from living congruently with your deepest values. And that peace, no one could take away from me.